The 96-hour clock had already run down to 94 when Sergeant Callahan, known only as Ghost to the men who followed him into the perpetual green hell of the Ashau, realized the extraction bird wasn't coming. It wasn't just delayed, the radio crackled with static that tasted like pulverized copper and failure, silencing the vital promise of salvation. We had spent the last 2 hours belly-crawling through a bomb crater turned stagnant, leech-infested pool, chasing a faint, high-frequency whisper that Diaz swore was the scheduled check-in, only for the signal to drown itself in the ambient noise of the jungle. The air itself was heavy, not just with humidity, but with the cloying, sweet stench of decaying vegetation layered over the acrid smell of old gunpowder and the distinct metallic musk of fear that clung to a man's pores like cheap cologne. Ghost dug his fingers into the black volcanic mud, pulling the M16 closer to his chest. His eyes, the color of iced-over lake water, scanned the triple canopy roof 150 feet above, where the sun was nothing more than a sickly silver haze. Johnson, our point man, nicknamed J-Dog, a kid barely 19 who looked 35 in the shadows, whimpered softly, a sound instantly smothered by the relentless chirp of insects that never seemed to sleep. We were Spartan 4, a 4-man long-range reconnaissance patrol, dropped into a quadrant so hot the maps were colored solid red. Our mission confirmed the location of a rumored NVA staging point and withdrawal route, a crucial intelligence puzzle piece the brass needed before the next big push. 96 hours, they'd said, 4 rotations of the Earth, then we'd be pulled out, regardless of mission success. 96 hours was the edge of the known world for recon units. Beyond that threshold, the jungle didn't just hide the enemy, it actively hunted you. Now, with 94 hours left and the primary radio link completely dead, the clock was no longer a lifeline. It was the fuse on a time bomb ticking inside our own skulls. Diaz meticulously tried to strip the antenna wire, muttering technical jargon about impedance and grounding, his hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the realization that we were truly off the grid, phantom targets in the deep woods. Doc Richards, our medic, checked the dwindling supply of morphine and bandages, his face a mask of weary resignation, the same expression he wore whenever he was forced to choose who lived and who merely existed. The duality of the war hammered us instantly. The absolute silence, the absence of human contact, was more terrifying than the roar of guns. In the quiet, the jungle became an active antagonist, the slight rustle of a giant centipede across damp leaves sounding like the tread of an entire platoon. The drip of condensation from a tree canopy mimicking the loading click of an AK-47. Every shadow held a sentry, every root a tripwire. We were deep inside their territory, a sliver of American steel embedded in the heart of their domain, and the air whispered the truth we all knew. They were coming for us, methodically, patiently, following the faint scent trail left by our desperation. We abandoned the crater just as the first gray fingers of dawn began to pierce the lower canopy, painting the jungle floor in sickly, mottled shades of green and brown. The humidity was already suffocating, wrapping around us like a wet sheet, making every breath a chore. Ghost made the hard call, ditch the useless primary radio, and move toward the rumored staging area. If we were going to die out here, we might as well die confirming the target, giving the next patrol something to go on. J-Dog took the point, moving with the preternatural quiet of a seasoned snake, his eyes darting, processing information faster than the human brain should allow. He smelled the fire smoke first, a faint, woody scent that had been scrubbed clean by the night's moisture, but still lingered on the morning air. We followed it, careful to avoid the well-worn trails, instead hacking through razor-sharp bamboo thickets and navigating treacherous limestone karst formations that could break an ankle with a single misstep. After an hour of agonizing movement, the vegetation began to thin slightly, replaced by a clearing dominated by massive, freshly cut logs. This wasn't just a patrol rest stop, this was a depot. The staging area wasn't a small cave or a hidden culvert as intelligence suggested, it was enormous. Hundreds of crates, covered in tarp and camouflaged expertly, lay stacked high. Inside, we knew, were mortar rounds, rockets, food supplies, and enough ammunition to prosecute a siege. The scale was terrifying. It implied not a few roaming NVA platoons, but a fully established regiment, perhaps even a division, using this point as a forward operating base. Ghost pulled out the Polaroid camera, his hands steady despite the cold dread pooling in his gut. Snap, snap, snap. The flash was almost invisible beneath the canopy, but the sound, the mechanical click of the shutter, felt like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. Diaz, hunched behind a large buttressed tree, kept watch, his secondary PRC-25 radio lying on the mud beside him, turned off to conserve power and avoid detection. He whispered that the tracks around the perimeter were fresh, too fresh. They weren't just boots, there were signs of heavy carts being dragged. We were sitting right next to an active logistics hub, meaning sentries, dog patrols, and reaction forces were nearby, probably sleeping just beyond the tree line, oblivious for the moment to the 4 ghosts taking pictures of their lifeblood. The weight of the evidence we collected felt physically heavy, a burden of proof that now tied us inescapably to this deadly spot. We knew we had to leave immediately, but Ghost insisted on waiting for the perfect moment of transition, the moment when the guard patrols shifted, seeking the small window of chaos where we could vanish. We were parasites now, feeding on the jungle's routine, and the realization hit hard. Success meant not just getting the photos, but getting the hell out, and the latter felt infinitely less likely than the former. The mission had shifted from a recon job to a suicide extraction attempt, and the clock was ticking down to 92 hours. The wait lasted nearly 3 hours. 3 hours spent pressed against the cool, damp earth, enduring the slow, agonizing torture of mosquitoes and the chilling certainty that any shift of weight, any audible breath, could summon sudden, brutal death. When Ghost finally signaled the retreat, we moved like shadows, retracing our steps with meticulous caution. We made it less than 200 yards before J-Dog stiffened, raising a rigid hand. Silence. Then, the distinct, wet crunch of a boot on decaying leaf litter. Not a friendly footfall, but the rhythm of someone trained to walk silently, yet failing slightly due to exhaustion or carelessness. 2 NVA soldiers, young, carrying captured American carbines, walked right past our hiding position, talking softly in Vietnamese. They were close enough that we could smell the cheap tobacco on their breath. We held still, muscles aching, trigger fingers twitching. They passed. Relief washed over us, swift and deceptive. As the second soldier disappeared behind a clump of ferns, a third figure materialized from the shadows, an older man, a patrol leader, who wasn't talking, wasn't walking, but hunting. He stopped directly where we had been 2 hours prior, his eyes sweeping the area. He saw nothing, but he felt something, the residual disturbance of our presence. He raised his hand and let out a sharp, bird-like whistle. That was the trigger. Everything exploded. The air instantly filled with the snap crackle of automatic fire. We didn't wait. Ghost roared the command to run, and we scattered like quail. The first burst of AK fire tore through the air where Diaz had been hiding, showering him with bark and splinters. We retaliated instinctively, laying down suppressive fire with our M16s, the high-pitched report a jarring contrast to the heavy, throaty sound of the enemy's weaponry. J-Dog, reacting purely on adrenaline, threw a smoke grenade to cover our disorganized retreat, the thick gray cloud instantly filling the area with the smell of sulfur. But in the chaos, the curse of the 96 hours exacted its first physical toll. As we scrambled over a shallow embankment, a sharp metallic ping echoed through the trees. Diaz cried out, clutching his shoulder. It wasn't a bullet that hit him, but a fragmentation grenade that landed 30 feet away. The shrapnel missed major organs, but shredded the already damaged antenna of the secondary radio, rendering it useless, and ripped the canvas sack containing half of our remaining medical supplies and, critically, our last water purification tablets. Doc Richards quickly slopped a field dressing on Diaz's shallow shoulder wound, his movements precise despite the deafening noise. We knew instantly we couldn't stay and fight. They had the numbers, they had the supply lines, and now they knew exactly where we were. The realization was stark. We had successfully captured intelligence that confirmed a massive target, but in doing so, we had sealed our own fate, trading potential victory for guaranteed survival if we could manage to find a way out without water, communication, or reliable medical support. The clock was at 89 hours, and every second felt like a decade as we plunged deeper into the uncharted, hostile territory. With comms completely severed and our water supply contaminated or lost, Ghost ordered us off the high ground and into the notoriously deadly lowlands, the Iron Triangle's southern edge, a vast, murky swamp system that bordered the river. It was a desperate move, trading the immediate threat of enemy bullets for the slow, agonizing death promised by disease and drowning, but it was the only way to lose the trackers we knew were dogging our heels. The swamp floor was a slick, shifting bed of putrefying mud, submerged roots, and decomposing animal matter. We moved waist-deep in water that felt like lukewarm soup, thick with sediment and buzzing with malarial mosquitoes the size of small birds. Every step was a monumental effort, sucking the energy from our already depleted reserves. The uniforms, soaked through, chafed off skin raw, and the constant immersion softened our boots and caused agonizing trench foot almost immediately. The relentless heat, amplified by the stagnant water, accelerated the onset of exhaustion. Hallucinations began almost immediately for J-Dog, who had been pushing himself hardest on point. He kept pausing, pointing wildly at what he swore were enemy snipers positioned in the moss-covered branches above. Ghost had to physically pull him forward several times, whispering harsh realities into the boy's ear to anchor him back to the now. Doc Richards worried about the infection setting in. Diaz's shrapnel wound, though minor, was already weeping a greenish pus, a clear sign of the virulent bacteria thriving in the jungle environment. Doc was rationing the last 3 antiseptic wipes, knowing that antibiotics were useless if the body couldn't fight the fever. We hadn't slept properly in nearly 50 hours, and the environment was deliberately engineered to break the human psyche. The air was full of strange sounds, gurgles, pops, the slither of unseen reptiles. Ghost felt the paranoia creeping in too, a cold, icy sensation that started in his stomach and spread through his chest. He saw faces in the mottled bark of the cypress trees, faces of the men he'd lost on previous patrols, staring back with vacant, accusatory eyes. The 96-hour curse wasn't just about the enemy catching up. It was about the jungle driving you insane, making you choose suicide over capture. He kept pushing forward, relying on the primal instinct of survival, driven by the knowledge that giving up meant sacrificing the crucial photos secured inside the triple-layered plastic pouch taped to his body. We eventually found a small island of slightly firmer ground, overgrown with thick, dense elephant grass, offering a brief respite from the water. We collapsed onto the mud, too tired to immediately check our perimeter, relying on the sheer misery of the location to deter immediate pursuit. The darkness that fell upon us was absolute, thick and suffocating, interrupted only by the ghostly glow of phosphorescent fungi clinging to the rotting logs around us. We were surrounded by the sounds of the night hunt, the screams of unseen animals tearing flesh, sounds that mirrored the savage acts humans were committing just a few miles away. The 82-hour mark passed in this wretched state, marked only by the agonizingly slow shifting of the distant stars visible through the tiny ragged hole in the canopy above us. We were running out of time, strength, and perhaps, most dangerously, sanity. The next day was a blur of movement and misery. We spent the daylight hours huddled in a crude, makeshift spider hole, a natural depression Ghost deepened with his entrenching tool and covered with a tight weave of ferns and vines. The NVA patrols were thick now, utilizing the dry trails we had wisely avoided. We could hear their voices, their movements, the occasional clatter of their gear, terrifyingly close, sometimes just yards above our hiding place. The pressure was unbearable, forcing us into absolute stillness. We couldn't talk, we couldn't cough, we couldn't even risk chewing the last few dry crackers we had left. We just existed, breathing the stale, earthy air, listening to the muffled footfalls of the enemy above, waiting for the inevitable moment when a careless eye or a stray boot toe would uncover our makeshift tomb. Doc Richard slipped into a feverish state, his breathing ragged, murmuring about his wife and the white picket fence he would never see. Ghost watched him, the hardened core of his cynicism chipping away. The only thing separating them from execution was this thin layer of mud and leaves, and the hope that the enemy was focused on the perimeter, searching for signs of large-scale movement, not a tiny, desperate hole in the earth. The constant surveillance, the silent, agonizing wait, felt worse than any firefight. In combat, you reacted. Here, you anticipated, and anticipation devoured your soul. We were at 48 hours remaining. Half the mission time gone, and we were closer to death than rescue. Diaz, though weak, managed a faint smile and traced the number 48 in the dirt with his finger before instantly wiping it away. It was a shared moment of grim gallows humor, acknowledging the curse was halfway through its term. This psychological warfare waged by the environment was intentional, an unspoken enemy doctrine. The NVA knew that if they didn't kill us, the jungle would. They just had to wait and let nature do the dirty work. It makes you think, doesn't it? When the mission ends and you're surrounded by the wreckage of your own mind and body, what is the single defining reason you keep going? Is it duty, loyalty to the men beside you, or simply the biological imperative of survival? If you've ever faced a moment where the cost of continuing seemed higher than the reward of stopping, I'd genuinely like to hear what drove you forward. Share your thoughts in the comments below. For Ghost, the answer was tied to the heavy, photographic proof taped to his chest. He couldn't let his men suffer and risk their lives just to have the evidence rot here in the jungle floor. That intelligence meant saving other patrols from walking into the staging area. But even that noble reason seemed thin compared to the fear that gripped them all, a fear that was slowly hardening into pure, unyielding resolve. We couldn't be rescued yet. The enemy presence was too strong. We had to wait out this agonizing half-life, suspended between Earth and enemy boots, hoping the relentless clock would slow down just long enough for us to make a move.
The agreed-upon extraction LZ was Rattlesnake 1, a rarely used clearing 6 kilometers north, scheduled for a low-altitude pass precisely at H-hour 44, assuming we could confirm the target. We had confirmed the target, but we had failed to confirm our viability. Despite the crushing realization that we had no way to signal, Ghost refused to break the protocol. He insisted that if the air wing was flying blind, they would check the primary LZ first. We risked everything, moving out of the spider hole under the cover of a brief, torrential afternoon downpour, which at least washed away some of the scent and muffled our movements. The rain was cold, but a blessed relief against our fevered skin, yet it simultaneously made the ground a treacherous, slippery mess. We arrived at Rattlesnake 1 at H-hour 45, exhausted and shaking, collapsing near the perimeter of the clearing. It was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that precedes an avalanche. We waited, our ears strained, listening for the distinctive, heavy thump-thump-thump of rotor blades. At H-hour 44, minus 5 minutes, Ghost signaled us to hide deep in the undergrowth, rifles trained on the center of the clearing. The air vibrated faintly, then the sound arrived. Not the heavy sound of a transport slick, but the swift, light whirring of a small OH-6 Cayuse scout chopper flying high and fast. The sight of it was a cruel twist of the knife. They were checking, but without confirmation, they wouldn't land. The scout bird circled twice, then banked sharply away. We watched it disappear, our hearts sinking with it. But then the real horror began. As the scout helicopter's noise faded, a barrage of automatic fire erupted into the empty clearing. Tracers stitched the air where the helicopter would have landed, tearing apart the already soaked elephant grass. It wasn't random fire, it was coordinated, heavy, and directed. The NVA had anticipated the protocol, they knew the LZ, and they were waiting for the promised extraction bird to arrive, even without a signal. They were hunting not just us, but our rescuers. Ghost clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. This wasn't just a matter of being cut off, we were betrayed by our own schedule. Our predictable protocols had given the enemy the advantage. The curse wasn't just time, it was systemic failure. The sheer volume of fire implied a significant enemy presence nearby, hidden around the clearing's edge, waiting for the helicopter to hover and unleash their coordinated ambush. Had we managed to signal and board the chopper, we would have dragged our air support into a slaughterhouse. Disillusionment hit Ghost like a physical blow. The promise of extraction, the very basis of their mission profile, was a lie. We were truly expendable. They knew, Doc whispered, his voice thin with fever and despair. They knew exactly where the ghost bird was supposed to land. Ghost nodded, his eyes hard and cold. We run. We ditch the LZ, we find a new spot, one that isn't on any map but mine, east, toward the ridge. Now.
The decision to run east, directly into the mountain range and away from the nearest known American positions, was pure desperation disguised as strategy. Ghost knew the enemy would saturate Rattlesnake 1 for the rest of the night, banking on us returning to the false hope of the known LZ. Our only chance was to go where logic dictated we wouldn't. Up, into the treacherous, steep slopes of the mountains, where the NVA supply trails were less established but still present. Diaz struggled the most. His wound was worsening, the fever spiking high enough that he was shivering uncontrollably despite the crushing heat. Every step was an agony, and he frequently stumbled, relying on Doc Richards and J-Dog to haul him over obstacles. The clock had now dropped to 36 hours. We had to move fast, but we were reduced to a staggering crawl. As we crested a low ridge, the sound of the pursuit became undeniable. Not just random noise, but the distinct sounds of tracker dogs baying in the distance, closer than they should have been. We were running out of time and space. We hit a small, swiftly moving stream, and Ghost knew this was the place for the terrible decision. They couldn't outrun the dogs with Diaz in his condition, and they couldn't afford to stop and fight. Diaz, though barely conscious, understood the calculation. He looked at Ghost, his eyes shining with a frightening clarity, and spoke 4 raspy words. "Give me the pack." Ghost hesitated, knowing what he meant. The secondary radio, though smashed, still had some juice in the battery, enough for a brief, localized burst if carefully manipulated. Diaz planned to draw the enemy away, sacrifice himself to buy time for the intelligence to escape. It was the oldest, cruelest equation of war, the individual for the collective. Ghost argued weakly, but Diaz simply extended his hand resolute. "Ghost, you have the pictures. That's the mission. This is the only way the pictures get out." The exchange was silent, agonizing, but final. Ghost removed the plastic-wrapped pouch containing the mission photos and passed the useless radio pack to Diaz. Doc Richards administered a heavy dose of morphine, holding Diaz's hand until the corporal's features relaxed slightly. We watched as Diaz crawled into a thick, vine-covered hollow, positioning himself to send a localized burst of static and sound, just enough to fool the enemy into believing the entire patrol was resting there. The 3 of us then crossed the freezing stream, obscuring our tracks as best as possible, and didn't look back. We listened, hearts pounding, until we heard it. A short, sharp burst of electronic noise, followed almost instantly by the rabid barking of the dogs and the frantic yells of the NVA soldiers closing in. Diaz had done it. We broke into a desperate, silent run, leaving behind the bravest man among us. The psychological cost of that moment instantly crippled the remaining members of Spartan 4, binding us in a shared, unbearable grief that now fueled our flight, transforming desperation into a cold, terrifying rage. We had 34 hours remaining, and the jungle had just claimed its second victim.
The sacrifice bought us maybe an hour, enough time to scramble higher into the steepest slopes of the ridge, where the terrain was punishing but the vegetation dense. We were moving purely on residual energy and the burning guilt of leaving Diaz behind. Doc Richards was fading fast, the fever refusing to break, his movements clumsy. J-Dog, driven into a state of silent, manic vigilance, suddenly stopped, gesturing downward into a crevasse hidden beneath a curtain of thick foliage. It wasn't a natural cave, it was an entryway, meticulously camouflaged. We knew the risk, but the NVA were still sweeping the area below, and the thought of being caught in the open, exposed and exhausted, was worse than the claustrophobia waiting below. Ghost made the swift decision. We were going underground. The tunnel entrance was narrow, forcing us to strip our packs and slide in feet first. The temperature immediately dropped, and the air turned thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of earth, sweat, and human waste. We were inside a Viet Cong tunnel system, a labyrinth of death stretching perhaps hundreds of meters beneath the jungle floor. Ghost took the lead, his face illuminated only by the faint, diffused beam of a small red-lensed flashlight. The tunnel was agonizingly cramped, forcing us to crawl on our bellies, our weapons clutched tightly. Every 10 feet was a potential booby trap, a punji pit, a tripwire attached to a grenade, or a hidden firing port. The tunnels mirrored the psychological darkness of the war itself, confined, confusing, and full of unseen enemies waiting to ambush you in the darkness. We moved slowly, painstaking inch by agonizing inch, the silence of the underground broken only by our labored breathing and the scraping of our gear against the damp earth. We knew the NVA used these tunnels extensively, meaning we were playing a horrific game of Russian roulette with the patrols still above and the residents potentially below. After what felt like an eternity, Ghost felt a slight movement ahead. He froze, instantly switching off his flashlight. The absolute darkness was blinding, the silence deafening. Then he heard it, the soft, rhythmic sound of breathing, too close, too shallow to be his own. An enemy soldier, perhaps a runner or a sentry, was moving toward us in the blackness. Ghost pulled his knife, a 7-inch slab of razor-sharp steel, and pressed himself flat against the tunnel wall. The man didn't see him, didn't hear him. He just bumped directly into Ghost in the complete darkness. The resulting fight was primal, silent, and brutal. Two men thrashing in the suffocating earth, fueled only by the instinct to kill. Ghost drove the knife forward, aiming for the core, feeling the resistance before the sudden, hot gush. He muffled the man's final choked gasp with his forearm, holding the body rigid until the spasms stopped. He pulled the knife free, the smell of blood filling the already foul air. Doc and J-Dog arrived seconds later, understanding instinctively what had happened. There was no time for shock or cleansing. We had to move past the body and deeper into the network, knowing that death was quiet, but its presence would soon be missed. We were down to 28 hours, now fugitives in the enemy's own subterranean domain.
The journey through the tunnel was a descent into hell. We followed Ghost through junction after junction, ducking into storage alcoves filled with stale rice and rusted weapons, avoiding vertical shafts that plunged into black water, and squeezing through mouse holes that scraped the skin off our hips and shoulders. The fear of being trapped was constant. One grenade detonated in the complex could seal us inside forever. The exertion took its toll. Doc Richards, already struggling with fever, began to suffer from severe dehydration, his lips cracked and bleeding, his eyes rolling back in his head. J-Dog, driven by a desperate, almost animalistic focus, took turns dragging Doc, refusing to leave him, the silent promise made to Diaz fueling his stubborn strength. We stumbled upon a small underground spring, a trickle of water collected in a bamboo pipe. It was stagnant and warm, but it was water. We drank sparingly, knowing that purified or not, it was life, the difference between minutes and hours of consciousness. The brief replenishment allowed Doc to administer a final, meager dose of antibiotics to himself and J-Dog. Ghost checked the mission photos, still secure, still dry. That evidence was the only reason they had survived this long. After 6 grueling hours underground, guided by Ghost's uncanny directional sense and a desperate hope, we heard a distant sound. The rhythmic pounding of a heavy construction project, meaning we were nearing the edge of the complex, possibly under an NVA camp. Ghost located a vertical shaft cleverly disguised beneath a trapdoor reinforced with metal sheeting. He whispered the plan. We would wait for the cover of pre-dawn darkness, then use the element of surprise to blast our way out, abandoning the stealth that had protected us for 90 hours. The clock was screaming now, 20 hours left. The waiting period was excruciating. The sounds of the NVA life, laughter, cooking smells, the distant sound of static radio chatter, taunting us from just feet above our heads. When the world outside turned dark, Ghost signaled. He rigged a small amount of plastic explosive he'd saved onto the trapdoor lock, positioning it to blow upward. He placed J-Dog and Doc, both barely able to stand, behind a thick support beam.
"Hold tight," he rasped, his eyes gleaming with the manic energy of a man who knows he is about to gamble everything. He flipped the detonator switch. The resulting explosion was small but deafening in the confined space, instantly blowing the trapdoor off its hinges and showering us with dirt and debris. The smell of fresh, cool air, mixed with gunpowder and shocked panic, rushed down the shaft. We scrambled out, 3 filthy, staggering ghosts emerging into the center of a small, busy NVA motor pool. Silence lasted for only a split second before the alarm was raised. We were exposed, illuminated by the harsh, bare bulbs hanging over the camp, and the only direction was forward.
The breakout was a chaotic, desperate symphony of noise and violence. We emerged directly onto a patch of open dirt, surrounded by stunned NVA soldiers scrambling for their weapons. Ghost didn't hesitate. He unleashed a full magazine of suppressing fire from his M16, spraying the area and creating instantaneous confusion. J-Dog, despite his exhaustion, found a last reserve of energy, dropping a fragmentation grenade into a small shed used for equipment storage. The resulting blast provided a momentary shield, diverting enemy attention and allowing us to sprint toward the perimeter fence. We were running on fumes, but the smell of freedom, however illusory, was a powerful stimulant. We smashed through the brittle bamboo fence, ignoring the tear of the splinters, and tumbled back into the dark jungle, leaving behind a trail of spent brass and stunned bodies. We were wounded, dehydrated, and suffering from malnutrition, but we were moving toward the secondary extraction zone, a spot Ghost had memorized years ago, an abandoned logging road high on the mountain spine. We maintained a grueling pace for hours, pushing Doc Richards between us, the jungle blurring into a kaleidoscope of effort and pain. The sun finally began to rise, not as a gentle glow, but as a blinding, harsh revelation, piercing the canopy and exposing the sheer brutality of our condition. Our uniforms were rags, our faces caked in dried blood and dirt, our eyes wide with perpetual terror. We were walking skeletons carrying expensive rifles. The clock was now at 4 hours. 4 hours until the 96-hour curse ran its course. We reached the logging road, a strip of packed earth barely wide enough for a jeep, just as the sun fully crested the horizon. We collapsed in the center of the road, too tired to find cover, too desperate to care about exposure. Ghost pulled the beacon, a tiny emergency strobe reserved only for final extractions, and activated it. He held the button down, the light flashing a frantic, silent plea into the vast sky. We waited, the silence of the morning pressing in on us, heavy and demanding. After 5 minutes that felt like 5 years, we heard it, a faint, distant, but undeniable sound of heavy rotor blades. Not one, but 2 UH-1 Hueys, flying low and fast, responding to the emergency beacon's coded signal. Hope, sharp and painful, pierced a veil of disillusionment that had encased us for days. But as the noise grew louder, the fear returned. If the NVA had tracked us this far, this would be the final, most brutal fight, a hot extraction in the daylight. Ghost pulled the men to the side of the road, giving them the last order. Fire only when you see the whites of their eyes. We get on that bird or we die here.